Drug trafficking in the Mekong region has developed into one of the greatest security threats that Southeast Asia faces today. The Golden Triangle, which incorporates Laos, Thailand and Myanmar, is the world's second largest producer of illegal narcotics, with Myanmar at the epicenter of the drug trafficking issue. Globally, the state is the greatest heroin producer after Afghanistan, and regionally it is the largest producer of amphetamine-type stimulants commonly known as Shabu or ice. Since the 1990s, relatively inexpensive forms of these drugs have been produced in monumental quantities. The transboundary nature and unpredictable environment of the Mekong River means that it is the ideal vessel for the transportation and trade of drugs. Despite ASEAN's attempts at tackling the drug trafficking issues, there are still major factors contributing to the perpetuation of the phenomenon. Poor economic performance, weak governance, a lack of cooperation between directly affected regional partners, and ensuing social problems hinder progress. If the Burmese government and other ASEAN members are aware of how serious the drug trade is, then why are there no effective regional frameworks in place to tackle these issues? Despite officials' efforts to control the grey economy, Myanmar remains the highest poppy cultivating country in the Golden Triangle. As the agricultural sector accounts for roughly 60% of the Burmese economy, it is more profitable for farmers to invest in the plantation of poppy fields rather than socially beneficial crops. There are three major reasons behind such motivations. Firstly, food security is complicating the problem. 94% of the income coming from the sales of opium is used to buy food. Secondly, debt is heavily embedded into opium cultivation, as 26% of the households in poppy-growing villages are in debt. Thirdly, the low accessibility of market and infrastructure makes it harder for farmers to stop growing opium. Without a market presence in villages, farmers have to bear the export costs of selling crops to the nearby market. This is evident in the poor transport infrastructure, such as poorly constructed local bridges and the time-consuming process of using boats. Therefore, farmers continue to sell poppy as drug traders are willing to travel to villages. Overall, this results in the creation of a vicious cycle in which Burmese rural families rely too heavily on the drug trade to sustain themselves. Locally, drug trafficking is exacerbated by highly populous and developing states that are prone to systemic corruption, a weak rule of law, and fragile prudential and banking systems. As a transitional economy, Myanmar is at risk because individuals and elites become habituated to working outside the regulatory environment of the government, which limits the capacity of the state. Myanmar's position in the Golden Triangle was perpetuated by the former Burmese Communist Party, using drug trafficking to fund its fight against General Ne Win in the 1970s. When the Burmese Communist Party split into separatist militias, such as the Wa State Army and the Shan State Army, the State Peace and Development Council reached agreements with some of these militias that permitted them to trade heroin in exchange for not attacking government troops or entering areas under its control. Production of narcotics in the Golden Triangle rapidly increased in the 1990s due to the trafficking activities of these groups that undermined the budding Burmese democratic system and increased levels of corruption among government officials. Even though Myanmar established its own Central Committee for Drug Abuse Control in 1975, it did not accomplish palpable results without regional help. Despite ASEAN's efforts to create a drug-free ASEAN by 2015, its policy of non-interference prevents existing regional initiatives, such as Accord Plan of Action signed in 2000, ASEAN Senior Officials on Drug Matters signed in 1976, and the Memorandum of Understanding on Drug Control signed in 1995 to effectively counteract the actions of drug traffickers and disseminate information between states in the Golden Triangle in order to apprehend cartel leaders. Furthermore, overly ambitious commitments to drug-free zones have meant that rather than tackling the root causes of drug trafficking issues, states like Myanmar have instead relied on heavy-handed law enforcement, leaving prison cells overcrowded with non-violent and impoverished offenders. Lacking a regional framework that can make a real impact, compiled with weak policing and institutional support, drug trafficking seems certain to continue to be an endemic issue. Shielded by the principle of non-intervention, profits from drug trafficking outweigh the social costs of the problem, causing the Burmese population to remain entangled in this harmful practice. From the 1990s onwards, Myanmar experienced a worrying increase in HIV-positive patients, correlated with large numbers of injected drug users. As a country of production and transshipment, it developed such issues due to local consumers' inexperience and subsequent struggle with addiction, existing medical facilities not being properly equipped to deal with the prevention and treatment of HIV sufferers. Illicit drugs also spiked crime levels, creating a dangerous environment dominated by threats, intimidation, and physical violence. Already torn by ethnic conflict and poor governance, Myanmar further descended into a general state of fear and distrust fostered by local drug lords. This erosion of social capital hampers education agendas, employability prospects, and the productivity levels nationwide, slowing down Myanmar's progress. In conclusion, the drug trafficking issue in the Mekong region is inextricably linked to local poverty, corruption, and the weak institutional mechanisms of the state. The drug trade continues to be condoned due to the revenues it generates, and it is aided by the exploitation of destitute farmers, lax government supervision, and frail cooperation attempts. Myanmar, alongside ASEAN states, needs to help create sustainable ways of farming that ensure that opium crops are not relied upon for survival. Harsh punishment for minor offences like imprisoning farmers represents a short-term solution, whereas providing them with educational opportunities and the acquiring of useful skills can reduce the social impact of drug trafficking long-term. Regionally, greater steps need to be taken to create an effective regional framework, such as cross-border law enforcement training, implementing prevention campaigns, and expanding border liaison offices. Drug trafficking needs to be tackled on the ground through socio-economic initiatives, but without a multilateral regional approach combating the underlying causes of the drug trade, there is little chance of producing significant results.